সেকাল গেছে যখন বাঙালির কাছে আফগানিস্তান মানেই ঝোলা ভরা মেওয়া, কিসমিস, খোবানি কাঁধে কাবুলিওয়ালা, আর মিনির জন্য প্রাণ জুড়ানো খোকি ডাক। কিন্তু একালের গল্পটা একেবারে আলাদা। মমত্ব বা বাৎসল্য নয়, বরং দখলদারি, যুদ্ধ, হামলা, রক্তপাত, পাল্টা হামলা আর মৃত্যু, এই যেন কয়েক দশকে আফগানিস্তানের একমাত্র পরিচয় হয়ে দাঁড়িয়েছে।
সালটা 1921। প্রথম বিশ্বযুদ্ধের পর্বে ব্রিটিশদের হারিয়ে স্বতন্ত্র দেশ হিসেবে আত্মপ্রকাশ করল আফগানিস্তান। এরপরই সে দেশে আমির আমানুল্লাহ খানের নেতৃত্বে শুরু হলো আর্থসামাজিক সংস্কারের দাবিতে আন্দোলন। ওই আন্দোলনের উপর দাঁড়িয়েই 1926 সালে নিজেকে আফগান সম্রাট ঘোষণা করেন আমানুল্লাহ।
কিন্তু বেশি দিন টিকল না সে সাম্রাজ্য। কিছু বছর গড়াতেই বিদ্রোহ দানা বাঁধতে শুরু করে আমানুল্লাহর বিরুদ্ধে। বিদ্রোহ এতই জোরদার হয় যে 1933 সালে আমানুল্লাহকে সরিয়ে সম্রাট হন জাহির শাহ।
এরপর রাজনৈতিক অস্থিরতা থাকলেও 1973 সাল অবধি সময়টা ছিল আফগানিস্তানের জন্য প্রগতির। জাহির শাহর সময় থেকে শুরু হওয়া সামাজিক সংস্কারের গতি বাড়তে শুরু করে জেনারেল দাউদ খাঁর হাত ধরে। তৎকালীন সোভিয়েত ইউনিয়নের প্রগতিশীল সংস্কৃতির প্রতি আকৃষ্ট দাউদ খাঁ আফগানিস্তানের রক্ষণশীল সামাজিক ব্যবস্থায় সংস্কার আনেন। এই সময়ই আফগান মহিলারা কলেজ, বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ে পড়তে যেতে শুরু করে বাড়ির বাইরে বেরিয়ে কাজে যোগ দিতে।
1973-এ দাউদ খাঁর নেতৃত্বে আফগানিস্তানের পিপলস ডেমোক্রেটিক পার্টি ক্ষমতায় এলে নারী অধিকার ও আফগান নাগরিকদের গণতান্ত্রিক অধিকার আইনি স্বীকৃতি পায়।
কিন্তু এই সামাজিক সংস্কারকে ভালোভাবে গ্রহণ করেনি রক্ষণশীল ইসলামপন্থী মুজাহিদিনরা। সংস্কারগুলিকে ইসলাম বিরোধী তকমা দিয়ে 1979-তে দাউদ খাঁর বিরুদ্ধে গেরিলা যুদ্ধ শুরু করে তারা। অস্ত্র ও অন্যান্য সাহায্য পায় আমেরিকা যুক্তরাষ্ট্র, ব্রিটেন, চীন, পাকিস্তান ও ওসামা বিন লাদেনের আল কায়দার থেকে। অন্যদিকে মুজাহিদিনদের বিরুদ্ধে আফগানিস্তানে সেনা প্রেরণ করে সোভিয়েত ইউনিয়ন। ফলে দীর্ঘস্থায়ী হয় যুদ্ধ। 1 দশক যুদ্ধ চলার পর 1989-তে জেনেভায় স্বাক্ষরিত হয় শান্তি চুক্তি। সোভিয়েত সেনা প্রত্যাহার করে এবং সরকার চালাতে থাকে মোহাম্মদ নাজিবুল্লাহ।
যদিও বেশি দিন স্থায়ী হয়নি সে সরকার। শান্তি চুক্তির 3 বছরের মধ্যেই আমেরিকা যুক্তরাষ্ট্রের প্রত্যক্ষ সমর্থনে কাবুল দখল করে রক্ষণশীল মুজাহিদিন তথা তালিবান। আফগানিস্তানে শুরু হয় নতুন অধ্যায়। তালিবান একদিকে যেমন মাদক চাষ নিষিদ্ধ করে সামাজিক সংস্কার করে, কিন্তু অন্যদিকে মহিলা ও আফগান নাগরিকদের যাবতীয় গণতান্ত্রিক অধিকারকে খর্বও করে। মহিলাদের কাজে যোগ দেওয়া বা পড়াশুনো করার অধিকার খর্বিত হয়। শরীয়তের নামে বোরখা বাধ্যতামূলক করা হয়। প্রতিবাদী ও তালিবান বিরোধীদের বর্বর শাস্তি, শিরচ্ছেদ চলতেই থাকে। এই পর্বেই 1997 সালে তালিবানের হাতে প্রকাশ্য দিবালোকে শিরচ্ছেদ হয়ে খুন হন নাজিবুল্লাহ।
এদিকে তালিবানের সময় থেকেই আফগানিস্তানের মাটিতে নিজেদের শক্তিশালী করতে শুরু করে আমেরিকা। ফলে আল কায়দা ও তালিবানের সাথে তাদের সংঘাত বাড়তে থাকে। 2001-এর পেন্টাগন হামলা এই সংঘাতকে সর্বোচ্চ স্তরে নিয়ে যায়। পেন্টাগনের মর্মান্তিক ঘটনাকে ব্যবহার করে সন্ত্রাসের বিরুদ্ধে যুদ্ধের নামে আফগানিস্তান আক্রমণ করে মার্কিন যুক্তরাষ্ট্র, ন্যাটো ও ব্রিটেন বাহিনী।
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. These carefully targeted actions are designed to disrupt the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist base of operations and to attack the military capability.
এই বাহিনী ও ন্যাশনাল অ্যালায়েন্সের আক্রমণের মুখে পিছু হটে তালিবান। কারজাইয়ের নেতৃত্বে মার্কিন সমর্থিত সরকার তৈরি হয় আফগানিস্তানে।
কিন্তু তারপরেও আফগানিস্তানে সেনা অভিযান জারি রাখে মার্কিন যুক্তরাষ্ট্র ও ন্যাটো। যদিও এই বাহিনীর বোমাবর্ষণে ধ্বংসলীলা, আহত নিহত আফগান নাগরিকদের ছবি প্রকাশিত হতে শুরু করার পর থেকেই মার্কিন দখলদারি ও সেনা প্রত্যাহারের আওয়াজ উঠতে শুরু করে সারা বিশ্ব জুড়ে। আর সে দাবিকে গ্রাহ্য না করে সেনা অভিযান চালিয়ে যায় আমেরিকা।
Finally, last week, I determined that we had enough intelligence to take action and authorized an operation to get Osama bin Laden and bring him to justice. Today, at my direction, the United States launched a targeted operation against that compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. A small team of Americans carried out the operation with extraordinary courage and capability. No Americans were harmed. They took care to avoid civilian casualties.
2012-তে যে মাসে তারা ওসামা বিন লাদেনকে হত্যা করে তারই কিছুদিন পরে মার্কিন বাহিনীর হাতে 16 জন আফগান গ্রামবাসীর খুনের খবর পাওয়া যায়। এর বিরুদ্ধে আফগানিস্তানে এতই তীব্র প্রতিক্রিয়া হয় যে মার্কিনপন্থী হামিদ কারজাইও সেনা প্রত্যাহারের দাবি তোলেন।
2014-তে সরকারিভাবে অভিযানের সমাপ্তি ঘোষণা করে ন্যাটো, কিন্তু সেনা প্রত্যাহার নিয়ে আলোচনা চলতেই থাকে। এই আলোচনা গতি পায় যখন মার্কিন রাষ্ট্রপতি নির্বাচিত হয়ে ট্রাম্প তালিবানের সাথে আলোচনা শুরু করে এবং শেষ অবধি ফেব্রুয়ারি 2019-এ দোহায় মার্কিন তালিবান চুক্তি স্বাক্ষরিত হয়, যাতে মে 2021-এর মধ্যে আফগানিস্তান থেকে সমস্ত মার্কিন ও ন্যাটো সেনা প্রত্যাহারে সম্মত হন ট্রাম্প।
If needed. When I came into office, I inherited a deal that President Trump negotiated with the Taliban. Under his agreement, U.S. forces would be out of Afghanistan by May 1, 2021, just a little over 3 months after I took office. U.S. forces had already drawn down during the Trump administration from roughly 15,500 American forces to 2,500 troops in country. And the Taliban was at its strongest militarily since 2001. The choice I had to make as your president was either to follow through on that agreement or be prepared to go back to fighting the Taliban in the middle of the spring fighting season. There would have been no ceasefire after May 1. There was no agreement protecting our forces after May 1. There was no status quo of stability without American casualties after May 1. There was only the cold reality of either following through on the agreement to withdraw our forces or escalating the conflict and sending thousands more American troops back into combat in Afghanistan, lurching into the third decade of conflict. I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time.
বাইডেন দোহা চুক্তি মেনেই সেনা প্রত্যাহার শুরু করলে আফগানিস্তান পুনর্দখলের লক্ষ্যে নামে তালিবান। কয়েক সপ্তাহের মধ্যেই কার্যত বিনা প্রতিরোধে হেরাট, কান্দাহার, কাবুল দখল করে তারা। এখন আফগানিস্তানে সরকার গঠনের পথে তালিবান।
কথায় বলে রাজায় রাজায় যুদ্ধ হয় আর উলু খাগড়ার প্রাণ যায়। এখানেও কি গল্পটা তেমনই? এত যুদ্ধ, রক্তক্ষয়, রাজনৈতিক পালাবদল কি কোনো পরিবর্তন এনেছে সাধারণ আফগানবাসীর জীবনে? এই রাজনৈতিক পরিবর্তনকে কিভাবেই বা দেখছেন তারা? কি ভাবছেন দেশের ভবিষ্যৎ সম্পর্কে? তালিবান রাজই কি স্বশাসন, নাকি আবার বিদেশি আগ্রাসন, নাকি এই দুয়ের বাইরে তৃতীয় কোনো বিকল্প? কি ভাবছেন আফগানবাসী? এই প্রশ্নগুলোরই উত্তর খুঁজতে আমরা কথা বলেছিলাম আফগানিস্তানের গণতান্ত্রিক স্বর আজিজের সঙ্গে। দেশে তালিবান শাসন ফিরে আসায় প্রাণ বাঁচাতে দেশ ছাড়তে হয়েছে আজিজকে, কিন্তু আফগানিস্তানে এখনো থেকে গেছে তার বহু সাথী, তার আত্মীয়। তাই তাঁদেরই সুরক্ষার খাতিরে টেলিফোনেই আমাদের প্রতিটা প্রশ্নের উত্তর দিলেন আজিজ। আসুন শুনিনি কি বলছেন তিনি।
Lots of talk is going around all over the world on Afghanistan. Hundreds and thousands of articles are being written on situation of Afghan in last few weeks, but most of the articles are biased and couldn't escape the frame of the binary. The binary is either one have to be pro-USA or against them, or either have to be pro-Taliban or against them. But what we don't get is the feelings of the Afghan people, and we are just looking for that. We want to know what are the democratic people of Afghanistan thinking, what is their view on the present situation, and how are they seeing their country and future and uh, their future. So we are very privileged to have a representative of democratic section of Afghanistan with us in this volatile situation of Afghanistan. For the sake of his security, we are keeping his identity discreet. On behalf of our channel 99%, I wholeheartedly welcome you in this interview. So thank you, Mr. Aziz, joining us on our channel. So should I ask our should I start my interview?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me and inviting me to this platform. I'd be happy to join and tell what is going on in our sick country.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Aziz.
You're welcome. Yes, please.
Yeah. So my first question is that did you expect that Taliban will come to power so soon? Did this sweeping of power surprise you? To be precise, last 4 decades of Afghanistan, first a pro-Soviet socialist government, then rise of Taliban with help of USA, then again a pro-USA government, now again Taliban come back to power. How do you see this development?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's a scenario of 3-4 decades. It started in 1985. Before the US and Soviet troops left Afghanistan and overwhelmed by some radicalist mujahideen, and the public forces, not only mujahideen, the Afghan nation. From that time, I think some supporter of recent Taliban groups started a fundamental establishment of these schools in Pakistan and in the southern border of Afghanistan, with support of some Arabic countries, Western countries, and even the United States and UK. And from that side, they grew up these extremist groups, which some of them divided in different branches. And 35 years before, they were part of some Islamic jihadi groups. And after division from, for example, from Islamic Party of Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, Haqqani, or so on, some new generation of Talibans started to come to the field. And once the Mujahideen started battle and internal war in Afghanistan started, then that was the best opportunity for Pakistan to introduce the new generation of Taliban for the board. And that was the beginning of a dark period in Afghanistan, which lasted over 5 years. And then with the September 11th, on that then falling down of the towers in the United States,
Yeah.
there was an opportunity for the Western country to start focusing on Afghanistan.
Yes.
But unfortunately, that was a short period with the superficial glance, not deep assessment of and analysis of all the roots of Taliban and situation in Afghanistan. That's my perception from where Taliban started and how they could grow up.
Okay. But the sweeping of power, did you expect that Taliban could can get the power so soon after the US army started leaving from Afghanistan?
Before talking about so soon, let me briefly explain when in 2012 the Taliban current political leader Mullah Brothers freed from the jail in Pakistan and the Taliban office opened in Qatar in Doha. That was the beginning of the new scene, the new scenario, which was drawn between the political leaders in Afghanistan with support of the United States. No one can ignore that.
Yes,
The
yes.
President
Yes.
Karzai was one of the the main supporter of current Taliban, he always said that they are my
Yes.
another brothers. So from that time, they have started to grow them up, and when Obama announced that we will draw back the forces, again they have become more powerful and more try to attract more nation support in the southern border. And then they started grow up gradually, took taxes from the every projects, every person, and every yields of the Afghanistan, and they started to support and to strengthen their financial resources.
Yes.
In the last 2 years, everyone believed that the peace negotiation is possibly will end to a peace settlement, to have a judge and fair participation of all Afghan nations. But unfortunately, in the last 2 months, the Afghan nation, most of the Afghan nation which were hopeful, they became sure that it's a game played by the United States, by the Arabic country, by Pakistan, and even by the political leaders of Afghanistan, and even by President Ghani. So they were all in the same bowl, and only Afghan nation were left in the other side. To be honest, no one expected such a fast changes, and even the United States, I think most of the nation in the United States and most of their political officials did not expect such a big changes. 300,000 military forces did not force. It was a surprising question. Everyone is asking why they didn't fire, and it was a big fail, not only for Afghan security forces. It was a big fail
The security forces unopposed.
for Afghan government supporter, for the Western countries, for India, for most of the Afghan nation. And unfortunately, now we're in a situation that no one is hopeful for the future or for a peace settlement. It doesn't mean when a terrorist group come and overwhelm all Afghanistan, no one can expect that they believe public participation or public participation of all opposition groups and parties.
Yes. Thank you. So my second question is, Taliban have sought to portray themselves as more moderate than when they imposed a strict form of Islamic rule in the late 90s. Taliban promised they would honor women's rights in the norm of Islamic law, but reports are emerging differently. For example, one female reporter from RTA was denied entry to her office while her male counterparts were allowed. Are there examples of more brutality against the female Afghan? Reports are coming that armed Afghan women are taking it to the streets. How desperate are they? Are they fighting a lost fight?
I think by using the opportunity of peace talks in Doha, Taliban enforced their diplomacy, their relationship with so many countries like China, Russia, Iran, and so on. And they are trying to convince the Western country and the countries that are apparently supporter of the democratic process in the world. They want to convince them that we are not the Taliban of 19th. We have brought some changes in the policies, in the procedures and strategy. But these are the Afghan nation to experience what will happen in the future, because others are those who are looking from outside. According to my perception, perhaps, and once they are being established, I think they are not only Taliban, there are a lot of other extremist groups like Hizb ut-Tahrir, Al-Qaeda, Jamiat Islam, and different extremist Taliban or Muslim groups that they will be giant Taliban, and they are mostly supporting the they're mostly against democracy and democratic process. They don't believe to election, to women participation. Possibly in the 6 months or 1 year, they allow the female to go to school or universities. But I hope that promise would continue, because they are the Afghan people who are the bottom stone of these struggles and these problems in the future. And a community, a society without women, without education and work opportunity for women doesn't leave any hope for others to stay in Afghanistan.
Ara Karimi issued an impassioned plea on her Twitter handle addressed to film communities in the world, soliciting their help and solidarity in protecting her people and fellow filmmakers from the hands of the Taliban. What do you think the future of arts, academics, culture, education, economy, and more significantly health of Afghanistan will be under Taliban? And what is next for Afghan people, men, women, children alike?
Yeah, everything depends on the future policy of Taliban. To be honest, most of the poor people, most of the communities were really tired with the corrupted government of Ghani. There was so many investment spoiled, devastated and misused in Afghanistan, and the level of social services and access to social services were in its deepest level. So now the main priority for people are security. There were a lot of kidnapping, a lot of internal war, and a lot of bomb explosion, suicide bombing, and so many problems. Not only the topic of Taliban or going to school or not, because the majority of Afghan people are illiterate and they are thinking about first security, then the source of income for their livelihood. But there have been so many other big achievements in the last 2 decades in the art, culture, media, open media, democracy, access to information. I hope some of these can be served with the support of international communities. If the European Union and United States or India or some democratic institutions want to leave Afghanistan and forget and say we do not recognize Taliban, that would be end of the scenario. It would have too much bad effect. I think the best opportunity would be to force Taliban for women participation, for political participation, and for mutual relationship between Afghanistan and the world. That can bring gradual changes. Even I recommend India not to draw up, not to go and leave everything. They have to start their political negotiations with Taliban leaders to at least can serve the 2 decades achievements that India and Western countries made in Afghanistan. So let's see what would be the interaction between the international communities and Taliban, and what would be the message and the policy of Taliban to the world.
Okay, but how could India interfere with this internal matter of Afghanistan?
I think it depends on the external policy of India. I don't want to comment on that, but what people believe that not only the United States and the NATO, but also India was one of the losers of this fight in Afghanistan. They have to change their policy. They have to do another SWOT analysis and see why the Pakistan intelligence could better develop and could better implement their policy rather than rather than India. So it's another opportunity for our friend countries like India and Germany, most of the European countries, that Afghan people, they are the friends of Afghan, to start on a new chapter of relationship with the new government. Instead of saying no, we don't recognize you, that would close the door, and then Afghanistan would be another battlefield for internal conflict, new resistance from the different part of Afghanistan, like west and north of Afghanistan, will be growing up. Then Iran will change its policy. I'm sure Iran will, after 1 year, Iran and Taliban relationship would be dark. So then my recommendation would be to not stop, and don't feel upset or don't feel overwhelmed.
Yes. Moving on next topic. My next question is something related to international politics. We have seen USA, China, Russia, and Pakistan, India all were taken part in meeting with Taliban leader during Doha Agreement. Now, some of these countries, including China, Russia, Pakistan, have already recognized Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan. What is your comment on their role during the entire period? Do you think the geopolitical stability would be disturbed in South Asia?
I think it has been a big conflict of the West and East. Afghanistan was the battlefield of East and West. Russia troops invaded Afghanistan and overwhelmed by Mujahideen with direct support of the United States and some Arabic and Gulf countries with Pakistan.
Yeah.
On that time, Pakistan was the proxy of that war on behalf of the United States. Then the United States came to Afghanistan, and it was a big injury for the Russia, and they have tried enough to absorb some groups of Taliban and support them. And Taliban were in the last 10 years some proxy of the Iran, China, and Russia, and that was another aim of the Soviet countries and their supporters like China, to overwhelm the United States again in Afghanistan. And they have been stuck in Afghanistan ground, and again they escaped from Afghanistan like what they left Vietnam.
Yes.
In current situation, there might be, according to my opinion, two scenarios. Either there have been an agreement between West and East, Russia and the United States and NATO, to not interfere to Afghanistan in the future and leave them to work together what they are doing, and Afghanistan could be a transit opportunity for the neighboring countries, for China, for production of gas from the Central Asia to Pakistan and China, and it can be a transit gate for everyone. That's one scenario. The other might be, again, that Russia and China have eye to Afghanistan and they want to have again some political and economical influences to Afghanistan with different strategy. Possibly they want to also encourage some NATO countries and the European countries to join them in recognizing the Taliban regime, and then continue with some big energy projects. I think the extraction of mines, the export of gas from Afghanistan. You have ever heard about those projects? Export of other energy, how they can divide the water from Afghanistan between Iran and Pakistan. And these are so many questions. Afghanistan is a country with lots of natural resources, especially water.
Yes.
So that might be a fight of water. And unfortunately, up to now, no one can predict what could be from this scenario the most probable scenario.
Yes. Okay. We have seen Taliban had directly impacted common American lives decades ago in 9/11. Now, while you are staying there, what are the Americans think about the Taliban victory in Afghanistan?
I think what is going on the ground is kept secret from the public awareness of the American nation and Afghan nation. Politically, in the last 2 years, the United States and the peace process that was leading by Khalilzad, it was a direct support for the Taliban, and all the changes were the result of those efforts. But after then, I think in order to silence the voice of public nation in the United States, their government should provide some incentives for those who left behind, for those who have worked with the United States, and in order to convince their people based on their human rights commitment, they are now announcing at least that we are providing some refugee support or some drawback of the those Afghans who have worked with the United States. These are, I think, some incentive that might be very temporary. The future of Taliban belongs to the new role of the Taliban in the government. What would be the new model of or the type of government of Taliban in the future, and how would be the relationship between Western countries and Taliban? Otherwise, they have already got the support of China and Russia.
Yes, but what are the American people thinking? Are they thinking that American soldiers should again invade the Taliban or start war against them?
After this immediate changes in Kabul and falling down of the everywhere under control of Taliban, now most of the American people, they are accusing President Biden for accelerating the process
Yes.
without deeply thinking about peace process and establishment of at least a transition government. But of course, there has been some claim on the Afghan side. When Afghanistan president escaped, then the people in the United States have right to say that why our soldiers should stay and fight. America's scenario was such a scenario that could fill all those gaps before they are leaving. They have forced Ghani to escape, I think, according to my opinion. It was their drama. When Ghani escaped, now one finger comes to the United States and four fingers are showing that the main defects and problems were Afghan leaders. Most of the people in the United States, they are very upset about the current situation, especially this sudden fall down of Kabul and the tragedy that is happening in Kabul airport and surrounding, these emergency evacuation, the tragedy of the aircrafts falling down of some youngs from the aircraft. These are dark chatting and talking among the most of the Americans at the moment. However, they are doing their own business, and Afghanistan is very small for them.
Yes. But what I see that the resistance forces are still fighting against Taliban, and Taliban is not wholly control of, not in 100% control of whole Afghanistan. So what do you think the resistance force? What is the future of resistance force?
You know that it's not a good news for the future of Afghanistan that I say that war will be continued. However, if Taliban doesn't respect the other nations, doesn't follow the advices of international communities and the message of Afghan communities to allow everyone to participate, and also if they would like to continue with their most radicalist policies, then the resistance will be continued, not only in Panjshir. I'm sure after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, so many resistance youth emerging leaders will be growing up, and at that time other countries who
Yeah.
have direct benefit to Afghanistan, like our neighboring countries in the Central Asia, even Iran, I'm not sure, perhaps India, and even some Western countries will support the resistance group. And that would be the continuation of the tragedy in Afghanistan. So again, this internal war and the conflict will be continued for a decade more.
Okay. I think you have already answered my next question, but I want to ask this again. There is a parallel claim emerging out of certain nations that power to Taliban means end of US's occupation and beginning of self-governance of Afghan people. What is your comment on this? Does Taliban represent Afghan people?
Nobody can say that Taliban represent all Afghan people, but of course they are representing part of the Afghan people. So that's they emphasize that a multinational government and the participation of all Afghan communities should be reflected in the new government. Otherwise, no one tribe or one party can be governing Afghanistan forever. If Taliban allow and accept other nations in Afghanistan, other nationalities like Tajiks, Hazara, Uzbek, other forces, not only the famous previous commanders, participations mean the nations, the communities, and acceptance of all nations can ensure all Afghanistan that the new government will be representing the Afghan nation. Otherwise, no one accepts the Taliban representing all over Afghanistan. That's not only my belief, even most of the supporters of Taliban, they know that they cannot govern alone.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Aziz, for speaking with us and enlighten us with common Afghan people's view on the current situation.
You are welcome. Thank you very much. And it was good. I hope I could have provided some relevant and useful answers to your question. And I wish a success for your team and a bright future for our community, for Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
তালিবানের ক্ষমতা দখল দিয়েই যে আফগানিস্তানের ইতিহাস সমাপ্ত হচ্ছে না, তা জানান দিচ্ছে আমরুল্লাহ সালেহ, জেনারেল বিসমিল্লাহ মোহাম্মদী ও আহমদ মাসুদের নতুন জোট। ইতিমধ্যেই এই জোট পঞ্জশির উপত্যকায় তালিবানকে পরাস্ত করেছে। লড়াই চলছে অন্যত্র। স্বার্থ অনুযায়ী ইতিমধ্যেই নিজের মতো অবস্থান নিতে শুরু করেছে আমেরিকা, চীন, পাকিস্তান, রাশিয়া, ভারত, ব্রিটেন, ইরান, আরব। আমেরিকার উদ্যোগে সদ্য সমাপ্ত সাউথ এশিয়া সেন্ট্রাল এশিয়া কানেক্টিভিটি কনফারেন্সের গৃহীত সিদ্ধান্ত বাস্তবায়িত করতে আফগানিস্তানের ভূমির উপর নিজেদের নিয়ন্ত্রণ বজায় রাখতেই হবে আমেরিকাকে। আবার চীনের ওয়ান বেল্ট ওয়ান রোড প্রকল্পেও গুরুত্বপূর্ণ আফগানিস্তানের ভূমি। তাই দেশের আভ্যন্তরীণ সংঘাত ও বিশ্ব রাজনীতির নিয়ন্ত্রণের টানাপোড়েন সব মিলিয়ে কোন দিকে যাবে আফগানিস্তানের ভবিষ্যৎ, সেই উত্তর দেবে ভবিষ্যৎই।